Alors, sans plus tarder, sur la thématique de la précarité et l'immigration, toujours en lien avec le retour au travail, on commence avec Stéphanie Premji.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. I will today will present my results in English, but what I want to do is present some results from a research project that we just completed, and at the same time introduce our new project that we're going to be conducting as part of this partnership. So we recently completed a study that was funded by Chaire that looked at access to workers' compensation in a context of language barriers. And this study was conducted with Danielle Côté, Ellen McCacken, and Ron Saunders. So according to some estimates, just to give a little bit of context, 34% of men and 48% of women who immigrate to Canada have limited proficiency in either of Canada's official languages. And women, older individuals, and non-white individuals are less likely to make language gains over time. So what we did is we compared two workers' compensation systems, so those of Quebec and Ontario, to examine how policies and practices facilitate or hinder access for workers who experience language barriers. And our analysis was based on 59 interviews in Montreal and Toronto with injured workers and key informants. Just a little note about our methods. So we spoke to workers who experience different levels of written or spoken language barriers with respect to English in Ontario and French in Quebec. And the key informants that we spoke to had specialized knowledge about aspects of the workers' compensation claim process, and specifically about the challenges facing individuals who experience language barriers. So I want to present just a few of our results. What we found is that, first of all, injured workers had limited employment opportunities and worked in jobs that exposed them to a high risk of injuries and illnesses. And that once injured or ill, they sometimes continued to work until they were no longer able to. So I want to read you this one quotation. This is from a worker in Quebec. I'll read it in French. The interview was conducted in French. So she says, ils n'ont pas pensé que j'allais faire le nécessaire pour faire une demande de procédure pour avoir une date de l'audience. La personne qui travaillait aux ressources humaines m'a dit, comment tu vas trouver l'argent pour payer les frais d'avocat? Est-ce que tu vas te vendre sur la rue Sainte-Catherine pour ramasser l'argent et pour pouvoir payer toutes ces démarches-là? So basically, this worker is talking about the pressure that was put on her not to take any action against her employer. And what we found is that there's really a dynamic of exploitation of precarity by some employers, and that this has implications for the eventual return to work of the workers, particularly because injuries that were sometimes small injuries often developed into permanent impairments. So some of the people we spoke to did file workers' compensation claims, and what we found is that they were confronted with various system-level hurdles. So workers' compensation systems in both provinces improperly took the issue of language into account, though there were some provincial differences in that regard. So we found gaps in interpretation and translation services in both provinces, but they were more pronounced in Quebec, where workers and key informants reported that in their experience, compensation staff rarely called upon professional interpreters and translator. And in fact, many workers in Quebec reported that they themselves had to pay for interpreters to assist them in meetings and conversations. On the other hand, in Ontario, the interviews indicated that language services were offered, but they weren't offered systematically or consistently. So I want to read you this one quotation. This is from a worker in Ontario. So he says, Whenever they send the letters as a non-English speaker, they should provide the letters in the language we are able to understand. Say, for example, all the letters were provided in English, where I'm a non-English speaker. I did not spend time reading the letters thoroughly. I just put them aside. So we're expecting that they would help us with the language barrier. This is number one. So in addition to this, according to, to participants in both provinces, language barriers were not adequately considered in the determination of modified work, accommodation, suitable job, employability, training, or job search. There were, again, some provincial differences. So, for example, key informants in Quebec asserted that language needs were seldom formally assessed or considered in those decisions, while in Ontario, the key informants explained that language needs are considered, but they tended to be underestimated. So this is from a key informant in Quebec. So she says, so, comme là, préposé au service à la clientèle pour un de mes clients, puis il n'est même pas capable d'écrire une phrase en français. Fait qu'il y a un problème. Ou une travailleuse qu'on voulait lui donner, je pense, une autre affaire de préposer au service à la clientèle, mais elle a de la misère à s'exprimer en français à l'oral. So this was compounded by structural issues, which were amplified in a context of language barriers. So, for example, the adversarial nature of the compensation system. The fact that the workers were given multiple and conflicting directives, the lack of accessible mechanisms for workers to challenge decisions, the complexity of the workers' compensation system and its language, the overall absence of face-to-face interactions. All of these factors amplified the barriers that these workers experienced. So language barriers in both provinces were found to cause delays, misunderstandings, and discrepancies, and this negatively impacted workers' health, recovery, their claim, and their return to work. So the workers reported finding themselves stuck in underemployment or unemployment, and many had to rely either on family members or reluctantly on social assistance. So we're in the process now of finalizing our report based on this study. And while we conducted this study, we obtained funding from the WSIB to look at language barriers in the return to work process in particular. And we just completed data collection on this study, and we're developing a guide for stakeholders on ways to identify and address language needs. And we're also developing additional resources to help, for example, a decision tree on how to identify language needs and how to work with an interpreter. So building on this, we will be conducting, I want to say just a few words about our new research. So this is funded by the partnership, and it's not a project that's looking at language barriers, but it's a little bit broader, looking at the issue of social and economic precarity more generally. And it's going to be focused on the South Asian community in Toronto, looking at work injuries and return to work. So this is a project that's going to be conducted in partnership with the South Asian Women's Rights Organization. I just want to give a little bit of background about this and just some of the results that came out of this initiative. So in 2018, I joined forces with community advocates from the South Asian Women's Rights Organization and the Injured Workers Community Legal Clinic to develop a health and safety workshop for South Asian workers. And the initiative really grew from a need at the community level for more information and advocacy around health and safety in the South Asian community, and also among South Asian women in particular. So this was funded by a multicultural community capacity grant from the Government of Ontario. And what we did is we developed a 2-hour training workshop on precarious employment, employment rights, and workers' compensation. We trained outreach workers who went into the community, and they shared the knowledge with other community members and advertised our workshop. So we held our workshop in February that was attended by 53 men and women. And in March, we held 2 focus groups with a total of 20 South Asian men and women to discuss and document experiences of work and health. And we produced a short report based on the stories that were shared with us during the training session, the workshop, and the focus groups. What we found, and I want to read you a few quotations from the focus groups to give you an idea of the context of what we are referring to as extreme precarity. Sometimes I put my shoes on and sleep on my bed so that I can go whenever they call me. One time we were laid off at 2 a.m. when we were working our night shift. There was no ride. Carpooling, car cannot go wherever you need. So where will you stay for 5 hours in the cold at night? I see every time they are not paying me for 1 or 2 hours. If I work 16 hours, they will pay me 14 hours. The employer says, why is she coming to work? Why is she giving me hard time? She's acting and she did not get hurt. Lots of pushing, and then the worker quit the job. What can we do? How can we gather the evidence? And if quit the job, then all benefits is gone. My kid is getting hyper, which is coming from my stress. My whole family, my kids, everything affected. So my mental health is highly affected. My 5-year-old worries about me and thinks I'm going to jump off the balcony. So as you can see from these quotations, these workers experience serious mental health issues. There are also very significant intergenerational impacts to precarious employment and work injuries in this community. So impacts not just for the workers, but at the level of the family and the community as well. So we will be looking at how do we access workers' compensation in that context? How does return to work occur in that context? So that's it. I think we will take questions at the end, right? Okay, thank you very much.